Hey, we're your hosts.
I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Jonathan.
And we believe that one of the most valuable gifts you can give to yourself is the gift of wholeness through integrating all aspects of what it means to be human.
And in this podcast, we're bringing you insight, information, and inspiration to move from a stressful to stress-free life.
Your journey to becoming even healthier and happier starts right now.
Welcome to Wellness Theory, the podcast.
Welcome to today's show, everyone. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Jasmine Navarro, who is a family wellbeing expert who coaches teenagers and adults to flourish through confidence and resilience building. And I can't wait for you to meet her today. So welcome, Jasmine. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I cannot wait to jump into this conversation with you because I think you've got a very unique backstory. And I think the work that you're doing today, particularly in the UAE, but I think you also do some work in the UK also, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
And it's such powerful work. So I'm so excited that you're on the show today to share your wisdom and your experience with our audience, because I know they're going to be like swept away by what you've got to share.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's a pleasure.
So let's jump into, why do you do what you do? Why have you chosen to dedicate your whole career to coaching teenagers and adults? Where does it all begin?
I guess that's a good question. It all started when I was a teenager myself, and I went through a difficult time. I went through a period of trauma. I found out my dad died, but I found out in the newspaper, and I was just hit with all of these emotions. But what I just remember most was nobody around me understood, of course, because they weren't going through the same thing, and nobody around me knew what to say to me. So people just didn't really say anything. Even my family, they're amazing, but they didn't know how to help me or what to do. And I guess, to be honest, looking back now, whatever they would have said probably wouldn't have helped anyway. But and I just remember feeling really alone. And, it took me a long time to realize what was happening to me, about 8 years, actually. And then I became a teacher. Many things happened and I ended up becoming a teacher because I wanted just to leave the UK, and that was the best way to do it. So I taught I worked with primary, secondary and adults. So I was working closely again with teenagers, and with my experience in the back of my mind and also working with teenagers in the classroom, I saw that sometimes teenagers, had the ability, but they were lacking confidence because maybe they were going through something as well. So this always stuck in my mind. And then I did it for like 20 years, Charlotte, to be honest. And then at the end of that, I thought, I always knew there was something else I was supposed to do. I always knew it. But, what do you do when you're in your career? Like, how do you just suddenly change direction? So finally, I just thought there's something else. And then I kept meeting co-active coaches. So I decided to do the training for that to decide what career I wanted to do. And during the process, that's when I realized, I know it sounds so cheesy and probably so many coaches say this, but I realized that's what I want to do, because I learned how important it was to work on yourself and have that self-awareness and how that can just change everything. So I got certified and I started working with adults. But then, of course, I remembered when I was a teenager, and I just thought, having these tools and techniques, wouldn't have made things really, really easy for me back then, but I know it would have helped because I didn't have I didn't think I had any resources. But of course, we all have resources inside us, and that's what coaching helped me discover. So that's where it all started from my experience, personal experience.
Wow. And it's interesting because you said there's like, you almost feel like you shifted career to some extent, but I think there's a very clear through line of what you're doing. Like, it doesn't sound clean cut. It's not like you suddenly went from being a teacher to real estate, you followed that thread. And I truly believe that our journeys, not just as entrepreneurs, just anybody, is that we have to honor the evolution. And if we don't do that, we end up feeling a bit contained in where we are. And it's key for me in terms of like the coaching industry, or just like the niching down message that gets drummed into people's throats, because I just think it doesn't honor who we're becoming sometimes. And I think it's so important to recognize. So your skills, from not only your personal experience obviously, but professionally as a teacher, that must be helping you massively with the coaching work that you do today, I would imagine.
Definitely, Charlotte. No, thanks. Yeah, exactly. And then I realized at the end of those 20 years, when I started delivering, creating my workshops and delivering them to schools and universities, I was like, now I know why I was teaching for so long, because I had to have that experience. Yeah. It really helped me prepare for my second career. So, you know, and I really do believe that nothing is wasted, is it? Because sometimes I think I should have done this before, but no, this was the way, and it's because I needed this experience behind me. You're right. Yeah.
Amazing. So Jasmine, let's rewind a little bit to your teenage years, because I would really like to know, like, what did life look like through your eyes during that time, finding out that, you know, your dad has passed away in the newspaper, and then not really being spoken to about it. Like that leaves a mark, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, awful. So he wasn't my real dad as well, so that's something else. So I think that's why maybe people didn't really say much, because he wasn't my real dad. So I felt like I didn't deserve to grieve. And everybody would say to me, you know, you're so lucky, what's wrong with you? Because I was so unhappy, because I was depressed. I was probably traumatized, you know, so people did notice, but nobody said, oh, it's probably because your dad's just died. Like, so nobody was saying it. So I just thought, well, if they don't know, then maybe I don't deserve to feel this, or I shouldn't be feeling this. That was the awful thing. So the way I was responding to my own emotions was like, I shouldn't be feeling this. This is wrong. It's my fault. I just remember feeling I don't deserve to grieve. I think I was feeling those things. So yeah, so I was really just dealing with it in probably the worst way possible. And I just felt alone, and I felt probably ashamed as well. Why am I feeling this? Why is it affecting my life so much? Because it really did. I lost my confidence literally overnight. I just lost all my confidence. You know, I was always, when I was a teenager, you know, loved having fun, always having fun, outgoing, you know, that kind of teenager. But as soon as that happened, I became really withdrawn. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to get dressed. I didn't want to do anything. So it was a massive change. So of course people noticed, but nobody mentioned my dad. And I was just like, why is no one talking about it? And I don't know if it's because people didn't feel comfortable talking about death, but it just made me feel so alone and so disconnected. And like I said, I felt like I was wrong.
Yeah.
And that was the worst, I think, for me, feeling wrong.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it happens too often, and still today. I know obviously times have moved on, probably from when you were a teenager as well, going through. The conversation is open a lot more, and that's not a dig it like that. I think we're about the same age, I think. So good to go there. But it's very common for people to play down what they're going through.
Yes,
right. And our emotions aren't validated in some way, or at least opened as a conversation piece to allow some form of expression, it can really create unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I hate that you had to suffer that way and feel so alone, and because I can really relate to that, and so many. Yeah, for sure. And you know, there's been so much work over the years in terms of learning to express myself emotionally, but also to articulate my own emotions, and because that's a really hard thing to do. And so one of the things that I love, and we were saying this before we hit record today, is that you're out there all the time, like doing interviews and things like that. But it can be so therapeutic, I think, in many ways, when we've had so many years of almost like holding it in and not really being able to puzzle.
You're right. Definitely. Yeah, 100%. I think. And also I think when you have like a mission and you're so passionate, I feel like nothing is going to stop you. Because especially because I feel like it took me so long to get to this point of actually doing what I'm supposed to do. So it's like, right, and we're not getting any younger, are we? So it's like nothing is, you know, yeah. But then sometimes that can be, it's a blessing, but sometimes that can be a curse as well, because then it's like you don't stop. Yeah. So you need the balance as well. So, but I think you do need to have that fire inside you, don't you?
Absolutely. And often that fire does come from some form of pain. It doesn't always, but often
Yeah.
does, especially if it's been the biggest mark on the world, I think, and the impact, just as a pattern I've noticed from interviewing so many people, and obviously people we've met and hearing the different stories. I think pain really can serve as a great force for purpose and for good in many ways when we learn to channel it. So you touched upon there, Jasmine, some of the emotions that you felt around like shame and loneliness. There must have been some kind of shock attached to that as well, and obviously grief you mentioned. And I'm curious to know, like, what has played the biggest role in you moving forwards? I know you said that you kind of left the UK. It was almost like an escape from the UK, using teaching as that vehicle, but like, what have been some of the most pivotal parts of your journey that have helped you channel that emotion into something resourceful?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think I left the UK, many reasons, but one of them was because I felt so misunderstood, and I just felt everything was dysfunctional around me. So just leave, because nobody's acknowledging this. I have to go. So I think with each country I went to, I started having like real conversations with people about real things, whereas maybe back home those conversations just weren't happening. And from those conversations, I don't know if it was because people weren't emotionally attached to me when I was away. Maybe it was that, so it was easier just to have conversations. I don't know. And then that's when I started realizing things and piecing together things. It took me about, I don't know, I think it was 4 years to realize myself why I was even depressed. To admit it, to actually have a conversation with somebody. Oh, I was feeling bad because my dad passed away. 4 years, imagine. But it's like with each country I went to and each new conversation I had, I realized things about my grief process. And then I realized I was blaming myself. And when I got to that point, I think it took about 8 years when I realized it wasn't my fault. That's when I never got depressed again, because I had waves. I would be okay, and then I would get depressed again, be okay, get depressed. Over 8 years, kept coming back because I hadn't got to the core. I still had this self-blame. So it's kind of like self-destruction, really. But when I realized it wasn't my fault, I was fine. And that's how I realize how important, the words we say to ourselves. My words were nearly destroying me, with the traumatized thing as well. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but
it absolutely
conversations helped me.
I think conversations can be really powerful, particularly in your experience, because I feel like I can really resonate with this, not being able to speak about things, and almost like it's brushed under the carpet, and it's like, okay, why are we really talking about the elephant in the room? Like, well, what happened? But again, I didn't know to question this stuff until much later, like yourself. I have this image in my mind from what you've shared, is that you've left the UK and you're traveling to all these different countries, and there's almost like a shell cracking for every country you go to, and there's just another layer releasing, releasing. Maybe it's through the vulnerability in the conversations, or the more meaningful connections that maybe you found within those conversations. I've just got this picture of kind of perhaps where you were and this unfolding, and it's really beautiful to see, because it's led you to this place of compassion to be able to realize it wasn't your fault. It's not your fault. What happened isn't your fault. How you felt, how you experienced it and perceived the whole situation, none of it is. And like, that's one of the most compassionate and courageous acts I think anybody can ever do.
Wow, thank you, Charlotte. It's I guess I think there's always, I think with time, I mean, I'm still realizing things now, I think that sort of awareness healing journey doesn't really end, does it? I feel like I've overcome huge moments, but I feel like I'm probably going to realize so many more things as well.
100%. And every level there's like something else as well, isn't there? And it's like happening, of course, a little bit like we said earlier, in terms of like career, it's preparing us for the next thing and the next thing.
Yes. Oh God, you're right. Yeah.
Such an important point what you've mentioned, because I think there is this almost like one and done mentality when it comes to self-development and healing. It's like, okay, do this coaching program and life's going to be perfect, and it's like, it doesn't really work like that. We need to recognize that it's a journey and unfolding. And I think what you've shared about communication, perhaps, and the conversations being a big part of your journey. I'd love to maybe dive into that a bit more, because when I have this picture in my mind of you almost like releasing these layers as you move around the world. Obviously, this is my perception of your journey, clearly.
Kind of,
but there's also this like confidence, I would imagine, that's been built every time a layer sheds. I mean, is there any correlation between that and then the communication? Is there any truth to that observation?
I think it's funny because I feel like there's 2 points, because of course one aspect of my life, like with my job and going to new countries, I became quite confident with that because, I was working with so many people from that culture, especially imagine in each country, I probably taught 1,000 students. So I really got to know the culture as well, and the people and everything, and always built that rapport, new connection and all of that. So my confidence for going to new countries and meeting new people is really, I had a lot of confidence in that area. But to be honest, I didn't really work on my my self-confidence. I mean, sorry, that's my self-confidence, but I didn't really work on my core confidence, my self-esteem, because I was just working on, my job and things like that and the external factors. So my self-esteem didn't grow at all, I don't think. Maybe I overcame some of those emotions, like the blame, the things like that. But it took, yes, I wasn't working on my self-esteem. So I was still having probably not very healthy relationships and things like that. And I still felt unhappy, but I didn't know why. So, and it wasn't until 20 years later, when I decided to take part in the coach training, that was the first time I actually acknowledged my emotions in the present, which made me then think, wow, I'm carrying emotions in the past as well. And then I had therapy and I processed the grief that I had held on to for 20 years. That's when things really changed for me personally. So I don't think, in my experience, and of course I could be wrong, I'm just talking about myself, but I think it's very hard to do that by yourself, like work on your self-worth by yourself. I don't even know if it is possible. Maybe once you've had a coach or a therapist first, then you can continue, because now I do it by myself with my training and my experience with therapy. But it took 20 years. I hadn't processed the grief. So how much longer would it have taken? I mean, I can't see me processing that grief if I didn't have help.
Do you, and it's a tricky question for sure, because we don't know what could have been, but do you think anything that led you to maybe having the external confidence to be able to then seek out the coaching and therapy?
That's very interesting, actually. Maybe that is connected. It's funny because when I came to Dubai 8 years ago, I think it's intuition as well, or maybe when your body's ready to release more information or more emotions, maybe when it knows when you're ready to process them. I don't know. Our body's so amazing, isn't it? Because when I came to Dubai, I realized I knew I was going to stay here for a while. Like all of the other countries, I'd been there from 1 to 3 years, and I always knew every time I went, I'm just here for a short time, that's it. But Dubai was different. When I came here, I sort of felt like home, and I just knew I was going to stay here for a long time. And I don't know if that's because my body knew I was going to find coaching here, or I was going to heal here, who knows? Or it could have just been, it took 20 years, all those experiences. So actually, I don't know, Charlotte, but it's a very interesting point though.
I think it always makes me curious to like wonder like at what point our life kind of segues. Like I really love, like if you've seen the movie Sliding Doors, it's like, does on the train the whole life change? Like I love that whole idea, and I kind of ponder on that kind of thing often, which is where that question's probably come from. But what you've shared there is something we speak about a lot on this podcast, in the work that we do, is unresolved emotion. And I truly believe that emotion will only come up when it's ready to come up and to be released. Right. I think sometimes it will come up and we'll push it back down, and we'll push it back down, and we'll push it back down as much as we can. But at some point, we just tip, right? And it's almost like, okay, now I can't push it down anymore. We're full to the brim. It's time for it to come out. And I think, and this was my past experience personally, is that because again, similar thing happened when I come to Dubai. All of a sudden, like not like in the first week or anything, over time, I think I felt safe probably for one of the first times in my life, which actually then allowed this emotion to come up and for me to be able to actually then release it. And I think there was a correlation between how I perceived my life at that time. I was in a stable place. I was perhaps ready to release. And I think you're right in, like, on a cellular level, our body knows when it's time. And I think sometimes podcasts and things like this as well, it can be really interesting to like listen to different episodes and different things, especially in the early days, and almost like follow the breadcrumbs to, oh, maybe this is happening inside of me. And then all of a sudden, like, there's again this moment or these moments that collate and allow us to actually fully express ourselves. What's your thoughts on that?
Totally. I think our body knows when it's time. It has that, it knows when it's safe, or maybe it knows, like, maybe for me and maybe for you, I don't know, that when I came to Dubai, well, my intuition knew I was going to stay, so it was like, this is home, so we have time to release. I'm not off again like in a year or something. I think so, but I think that's incredible, just that, isn't it? And that's the one thing I always say I had since I remember being like 8 years old, intuition. So I say I didn't have any access to inner resources, but I think intuition is absolutely a superpower, isn't it? Once we tap into that. So I think it's all intuition, actually, when you think about it.
100%. It's almost like we already knew, we just didn't know that we knew.
Exactly. But I think the more I work on myself, I don't know about you, but the stronger the intuition is, or the more you trust it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. The more you trust it. And it's, again, funny, before we hit record, we were talking about boundaries being here and like the pace of life here and like work. And I think sometimes that, for me anyway, intuition can almost be overshadowed a little bit if I don't enforce boundaries. And that's where you can easily get swept away into this idea or this project or this thing, and it's like, hang on, no, what's the mission? Who am I? Let's come back.
Get grounded.
Exactly. And then you can but it's taken me years to figure that out, and to be able to continue walking this path and bringing myself back. Is that something you experience at all?
Definitely, 100%. And I think it does, it does take a long time. I think all of this that we're talking about, I just don't think it's possible for when you're in your 20s to even know this at this level. I think we need to have this life experience behind us, don't we? I really do believe that. Like, what you know at this age it's impossible to know in your 20s. I really do believe that. I think we need this life experience behind us.
So there's a concept that I'd really love to open with you, and this is the idea of self-parenting, right? Because there's going to be people that perhaps listen to this podcast that don't have kids, maybe they don't even want to have kids, but they've obviously been a kid at some point, and they perhaps can recognize that there's some, maybe more like an inner child experience going on within them. And the reason I bring this up as well is because it's a big part of some of the work that we do with coaching, but from a personal standpoint, inner child work and self-parenting, it's actually been really useful. So what I mean by self-parenting, kind of through my eyes, is that we almost like give ourselves as adults perhaps what we needed or didn't have when we were younger, or we build upon what we did have. So I'm really curious to know, like, what's your thoughts on self-parenting?
No, I absolutely love that, actually. And I learned that because I don't do that as a coach, really. I mean, occasionally I do, but with me coaching, it's all about present and future. So this is like the past, isn't it? Occasionally it comes up and I help my clients with it, but no, I've done that myself, and I think it's amazing. So like when I had my therapist, she was she was into hypnosis, so it was a lot of hypnosis, which for me is the most powerful thing ever. Visualizing the past, present, the future, I love it. And I think because you tap into your intuition really quickly, don't you, and your body, subconscious. So yeah, she taught me about that. I don't know if I would have been able to do it if we hadn't practiced first. I don't know, but and I do it now myself, you know. So if maybe I'm triggered or something like that, then maybe I can't at the moment, but as soon as I have the time and the space, I will pause and speak to that emotion in a child, you know. And normally I get a vision of an image of how old I was.
Yeah,
it just comes up. So it's quite, because I've done it so many times, so I get the image. Okay, so I was about 8 then. So what, and then I would talk to myself, you know, maybe say sorry, like, I'm sorry you didn't get what you needed then. What do you need now? Like really soothe that inner child, that emotion.
Yeah.
And answers as well. You know, I ask questions. I'm having a conversation with my inner child, and it's mind-blowing sometimes, the things that come up, and I'm like, wow.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
they'll just say one thing and I'm like, yes. And then, and you know, you just connect things, don't you? And then I just keep soothing. And sometimes that inner child will keep coming back. But finally, when I maybe get to the core of the pain of that inner child, then it sort of dissipates. And then I'm not triggered anymore, actually, or not triggered as strongly, because there's so many levels, aren't there? But that's what I do. And so yeah, it's a conversation. Yeah, and conversations with your inner child it's like the conversations we need to be having now as well. It's
Exactly.
the same.
Exactly.
It's the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so powerful because, like, again, like the conversations that I've had with like little Charlotte have been like probably some of the most profound I've ever had in my life. Like, I didn't realize that there was so much resentment between me and the younger me. And
Wow.
I actually realized a good few years ago, about 3 years ago, that I was experiencing a lot of survivor's guilt. I felt guilty that I was living the life that I was and being able to do everything that I can do, because little Charlotte didn't get to experience that. And the minute I realized that, I was able to release that and forgive myself.
Wow.
I didn't know about it consciously, but I was holding it.
Wow.
And it was just like, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it now, because it just felt like everything integrated. And it's interesting. I had a moment earlier this year. I went back to the UK to visit a family, the big birthday and retirement and this kind of thing. And I've been doing a lot of inner child work, and like you, it's ongoing. You know, it's something that's going to be a forever thing. And I kind of like that now. I used to resent that. I used to didn't like the idea that this was my life's work. You know,
I like that, yeah.
But it's just genuinely how I felt. And I remember this time though, when I came back on the aeroplane, I just closed my eyes and just was reflecting on the trip. I wasn't writing, and normally I'm an avid journaler, but I just closed my eyes and I just had this image of me and all the little Charlottes that have gone before, just holding hands. And it was just such a like moving experience.
That's amazing.
But it wasn't, like you said, like it wasn't something that designed. It wasn't something that I was working on in particular in that moment. It was just something that when I was reflecting on my emotion and my experiences, it just came up and it happened very naturally. So what you said about intuition, I think, is bang on, because when we can trust ourselves to do what needs to be done kind of unconsciously behind the scenes, it can actually create so much wholesomeness, I think, within ourselves and a semblance of peace.
That's so powerful, that what you shared with all holding hands, because that just for me symbolizes peace, acceptance. I don't know, that's I haven't had that. Now I'm going to want that.
on the plane. I'm like crying, and I'm like, but it was in such a nice way. Like they were happy tears. They were like loving tears.
Yeah, of course. That's like a huge moment. Like that's huge. Yeah. I haven't experienced that.
Thought I was crazy. Oh, and don't get me wrong, even since then we've stopped holding hands a little bit and then we've come back together again. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it is that, like, you know, ever-present, always going to continue. But bring back what you said when I started to speak about this kind of inner child and self-parenting, because you said it's not necessarily just about like the inner child. Listeners might be thinking, what is that about? Like, why are these people talking about like the younger versions of themselves? That might be a bit far down the line, but what you said is the emotion. So forget about inner child, listeners. Forget about younger versions of you, perhaps, for the moment, and let's talk about the emotion. Just sitting with the emotion, because I think that's almost like another way of working with the inner child, right? Is when we focus on what we're actually experiencing.
Yeah. So it's the same. So yeah, for me, it's the same. Like if I'm triggered, there's an emotion I believe that's sort of hasn't been processed. Like there's maybe a painful experience that hasn't been acknowledged, questioned, soothed, and all of those been felt. So but I guess when I close my eyes, I always see an image of whatever age I was. So I guess that's the inner child that's the time it happened, when I was a child.
Yep.
But so I don't know if this is making sense, but so
almost like the emotion is the door that takes you to your inner child. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. I guess the emotion is the feeling, but the image is the child.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't know if everybody sees an image. Yeah, like you do. You see an image as well, don't you? I think the more you do it, I think, because I've done similar things with clients, but not always about the past, but sometimes it takes them a while to start. They just feel, and they don't always see things. But I think with practice, you become more, maybe you trust your body more. I don't know, like with everything, because now I just have to close my eyes for a second and I will get the image of me and where I was and everything.
Amazing. Like it's I see it almost like it as a gateway. Our emotions are, I always used to think our emotions are a call to action. But I truly believe now that actually I think our emotions are a call to wisdom. They're, when we feel an emotion, whether it's a higher vibrational or a lower vibrational one, I think sometimes we're quick to almost like change it, understand it, learn from it, move on to the next thing. And actually, do you know what? When exactly what you've described there is we sit with that emotion. Well, that's when we get to really get the wisdom, right? That connects us to our intuition even.
Sorry, I missed that bit.
Is that fair to say? Does that make sense to you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And our emotions, past, present, future, are it's an important tool from our body, isn't it? So learning how to use that tool to receive the wisdom from our body. I mean, there's nothing else like it. And that's the thing, and that's the older I get, the more I realize, how amazing our body is. And that's just one part, with the emotions, but everything, like our body has everything we need, if only we just tap into it. And all of this work, I've always been sort of conscious about being healthy, but now I treat my body so much better. I have so much more respect for my body than I ever did. I don't know if that's just a thing of getting older or it's the work, I've done, the awareness and all of that.
Probably a combination, I would imagine. One of the patterns that I've seen with the clients that we work with is that when we move out of almost like a self-destructive pattern, not that we necessarily doing it on purpose, but when we're in that has to change to something else, right? That has to evolve. So what does self-destruction evolve into? Usually self-love, self-compassion, and I think there's just a pattern that we've witnessed, but it's something that's within you, right? You probably wouldn't have second thought about looking after yourself now. Like it just almost becomes the norm to some extent.
That's true. After a lot of practice and retraining your brain. And I always go back to now, because of those words that I was saying to myself, like when I hated myself and how ill it made me. Of course, it was probably the shock as well, but the words just made it even worse. So now I really realize, and Dr. Joe Dispenza says it all the time, doesn't he? If words can make you sick, then words can make you better. And so the way I talk to myself now is just so different. And even when I injured my wrist, I smashed it into 10 pieces, and the doctor said, it's only going to mend 70%. It will never be 100%. And I know this sounds crazy, but I don't know why, intuitively, I just spoke to my wrist every morning and every evening, and I rubbed oil on and I said, you will heal 100%, 100%. And I would go back to the doctor's physio and they were like, what are you doing? Like, it's healing really well. And I was like, I'm talking to it. And they're like, well, whatever you're doing, it's working. And yeah, and it healed 100%. They couldn't, they were like, this is a miracle. And like, I don't know if it was because I said those words to it every day, but
I believe
or
it.
I was just lucky.
I believe. I don't believe in luck.
Really.
Luck. No, I believe in serendipity. I believe
Oh
in.
wow.
I just believe everything's unfolding the way it's supposed to, whatever happens, right? And I think if we our intuition, I think it leads us exactly where we're supposed to be. And for you, talking to your wrist is what moved you forward.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Well, there's so many studies out there to show like talking to plants makes plants grow. Not these ones, because these are false. But they you know, there's so many studies out there to show that when again talk to a child in a certain way, their development is often a lot more resourceful and healthier as they grow up as well. So like it's something that's, you know, luck, I think, is something that can be really intentional.
Right.
I'm actually like really conscious about like the language I listen to. Like there's certain music that I won't listen to. I won't entertain it. Like my husband Jonathan absolutely loves like rap music and like just stuff that's got lyrics that I can't relate to, or I don't want to relate to, at least. I don't know which it is.
Yeah.
But for me, like even lyrics in music and the music choices I'll listen to, like the lyrics have to be, they don't have to be perfect, but they need to be meaningful. They need to be going somewhere. They need to be like resourceful language. And I think that has influenced me. And it was something that I noticed when I was younger that I liked about music. I didn't realize what quality of thinking was and mental health was at that time, but I do think it might have had a bit of a contributing to how I feel, for sure. Yeah. So give us an example, Jasmine, of like, what do you say to yourself now? Obviously I know you've shared, you know, in the past it was quite self-destructive. What do you say to yourself today? What's the narrative?
I try to make like healthy habits. So for example, every morning now, because when I was when I first started coaching and I had therapy and all of this, when I was first really working on myself, I had a coach and she introduced me to like mirror work and all of this. That's how I became so aware of the words that I say now, because even though the words I was saying to myself a few years ago weren't self-destructive, but they still weren't very nice. You know, I was just putting myself down, beating myself up and all of that. So she made me realize, what do I say to myself when I look in the mirror? And I know I didn't say nice things, maybe like, oh, you look a mess today, or da. So I thought, right, so that's what I started changing. And I think it was just maybe I'm okay. Maybe I started with that, I'm okay. But that was a huge shift. And then in the evening, same thing, or anytime I looked in the mirror. But now, so that was a few years ago. Now what I do, I always put I'm a bit obsessed with castor oil at the moment, I have to say. So I love natural things. Okay. So I thought, right, I'll put that on every morning. So I try to have like a ritual. So I put the castor oil on, and while I'm putting that on, that's my time to say really nice things to myself. So I'll say, you know, what it sounds really, of course I say something like I love myself, or I'm really happy with what I'm doing, I'm proud of myself, just a few things like that, which I never would have said. And I'm massaging, you know, putting this oil everywhere, and I do the same at night. So I'm consciously doing it then. And of course throughout the day, maybe I'm not always nice, because sometimes you don't even realize what you're doing, do you? But now I have those 2 moments every day where that's my time to really be nice to myself. So I think that really does help. And I think doing that has helped me do it automatically as well, without realizing.
It's like a muscle, isn't it? The more you do the rep, the easier it will just do it by itself, you know. And what you've said there, and I really want our listeners to hear, is the way you've anchored that narrative to a behavior that you do during the day, because it's too vague to wake up in the morning or to see a meme on social media or to listen to a podcast and be like, right, I'm gonna be kind to myself today, and then the minute you go off the day, you forget about that completely, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So anchoring it to something that you're already doing or something new, activity pairing is like a golden strategy. So I love that. I think that's brilliant.
Me too. No, thanks.
Right, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be car store. It could be every time you will get into your car. And I've heard before one of every time you walk through a door frame, that's your trigger to be kind to yourself or change the narrative.
Yes. I've heard of things like that. Anything. I'm still working on, because when I first open my eyes in the morning, I'm not always that positive. So that's what I need to. Now you've said that, I'm going to try and do that now. When I first open my eyes, quick, say something nice.
That's your trigger. Well, it's interesting because a lot of people experience that. And because when we first wake up in the morning, our stress hormones are actually at their highest, right? When our stress hormones are at our highest, we almost can go to like a default, which is like what those, early development years, right? When we were younger. So when your cortisol is higher, we go back to that default mode. So it's nothing that you're doing or not doing. It's actually very natural that you're experiencing. But the strategy.
You're right. But can we change it? Or do you think that's something we just have to?
No, we definitely think we can change it. I just think it takes that awareness of when is it happening. And I think over time, it definitely does. But I don't believe it happens in a moment, in an instant. When you release emotion, I think sometimes the thoughts and the habitual ways of thinking can release, but sometimes it's not by emotion. Sometimes it is just habitual, right? In the same way, I think our eyes are our heartbeats. Like there's some kind of signature in the body from whatever it is we've learned. So I do think it can change with focused attention.
Exactly, repetition. And I think another like habit that I do much more now is which I learned in coaching, just like putting my hands here, like on my heart. I think that can be quite a powerful moment, when you're really listening to yourself and listening to what your heart really wants. It's calmed me down so many times when I've been really stressed. And it's just a tiny thing. It takes a few minutes,
right? And it's not like a fluffy idea what you're sharing there. Like there's actually science to back that up, from a stress standpoint, when we can connect to some form of rhythm, particularly our heart rhythm, move into a much healthier state, our nervous system literally starts to calm down. So by that connection, it's really powerful. And I'm somebody that used to really struggle with feeling emotion. I was quite dissociated with myself feelings. Kind of logically, but to tell you how I felt would have been alien for me. Next, with my heartbeat, I would say again was a doorway to me being able to then actually name emotions and start to connect with intuition. So again, it's just for anyone listening, because I know sometimes, and I know if I'd have listened to this way back when, I'd be like, well, that sounds a bit fluffy, but there's so much behind it, these small exercises, they might sound so simple, but they can have sometimes the biggest effect on our lives.
No, you're right, Charlotte, and I think it is sometimes we overcomplicate things, don't we? And it really is about going back to basics. It's a simple sort of breathing, learning how to breathe properly. I mean, when I had this anxiety, I was like, what can I do? And intuitively I just started breathing. I thought, actually, that's amazing. I don't need anything, I just have to breathe.
Exactly. In the same way that touching your heart brings our nervous system down, breathing does the same thing. Here's another little hack for you for the morning thinking that's happening is start to lower our baseline cortisol levels first thing in the morning. If we are retraining our breath throughout the night when we are sleeping, we actually wake up with less cortisol. We're still going to have a spike because that's very natural, but it will the spike will not spike as high as what it usually does. So an easy hack for that, if you're open to the idea, is something called sleep tape. So you get a little bit of tape, a bit like a band-aid, is kind of what it would look like. You can Google it and you'll find sleep tape, and you literally just tape your mouth closed when you go to bed at night. You're still breathing through your nose, But it's stuck because we are only breathing through our nose. It immediately moves our body into that rest and digest state where most people sleep with their mouth open, and they're actually not getting into those rest and digest states as deeply as what they could, just because they're not breathing. So for anybody that struggles to find time for like breath work or meditation and things like that, you can literally start to change your biology while you're asleep by simply putting a little bit of tape over your mouth and taking it off when you wake up.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And no, that's brilliant. And so I always wondered why in yoga they breathe through their nose. So that's why then. Yeah, so it's actually better for us to breathe through our nose, because I always wondered why they did it. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, definitely. So there's so many different ways of breathing. There's a podcast episode I actually did with Jonathan, my husband, who specializes in breath.
Oh, really?
Conscious breath. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I'll share it with you. It's called Conscious Breath.
Please do.
But he talks about the different types of breathing, when you're breathing through your nose, when you're breathing through your mouth, because we do want to breathe through our mouth, right? That's okay. We just don't want it to be our dominant when we're trying to rest. So there's different benefits, different ways in which we breathe. So it can just be, again, this like hidden superpower that we all have. It's free, and we can just like almost like manipulate it in the way that we need for the results that we want, and it can change everything. Give that a try.
No,
how you get on.
I will. Sleep tape. All right, I'll write it down. No, I love things like this, like the simple. When it's too complicated, I think no, it's not.
Exactly. And sometimes we overcomplicate things, particularly in the coaching world. So tell us a little bit more about what you do, because I know you have specifically like a confidence program that you tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I've got my creator confidence programs. I've got one creator confidence for adults, creator confidence for teens, creator confidence for primary. And basically it's just, you know, and I really try to simplify it, because I know for me, I get overwhelmed, you know, with all this information we have. So I really try to simplify it. So it's like colorful, it's fun. And each workshop teaches different techniques for maybe feeling confident, or let's connect with our superpower. That's one. And, you know, participants, this is, if it's a group one-to-one, it's slightly different. But if it's, you know, participants can, they can either talk about things, they can write about things, they can draw, they express how it works for them, basically. You know, it's all about them. It's very learner-centered. And so I just take them on like a self-awareness journey, and they discover different things. So yeah, you've got connecting with superpower, perspective exercises, you know, how important it is to know that we can look at different topics a million ways, more than a million ways. So making that conscious choice, goal setting, taking action. There's so many. Emotional awareness, obviously that's a big one in there. Self-discovery. There's so many different ones, but yeah, I just try to make it, you know, creating that safe space. I learn from them too. You know, it's not like I know everything. I'm just showing them some tools, techniques. They'll use them how best suits them. But it's simple as well. I try to keep it simple because I don't want to overwhelm anybody.
Sometimes less is better, for sure. And I what I really love is that I think is unique with what you do, perhaps compared to other people that might do something similar, is the space for expression. So like I said earlier, for me, like I struggle to express through words and through feelings, right? So both of those two are a big challenge for me. But give me a paintbrush, I can, and then I can tell you how I felt.
That's amazing. Yes.
So I love that so much about your programs, because it gives people the space to be able to process that's the way they need to.
I think so. And I think it can be really underestimated, because even like when I talk about effective communication, you know, we need to be active listening, non-judgmental, and all of this. I think so many of us don't even realize we're being judgmental or not listening. Like, because it sounds so simple when I say, you know, these simple tools and techniques, and even with like really close friends of mine, I mean, they're not trained coaches or anything like that, but sometimes I open up to them, you know, and even like really close friends, and I know they care about me and they want the best for me and they don't want to hurt me. But sometimes the way they respond, I think, that is really judging. That's judging, but they have no idea. They think they're saying the right thing and they think they're helping me. And I think, wow. And these are like really good friends. So I think this is so important, letting people speak freely and express themselves the way they need to, but not judging. But people don't know how to do it.
How does someone?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, even when I explain it, people will be, oh yeah. But still, no, I just think it really is a case of, it's not about you. It's not like, if you're telling me something, it's nothing about me. Like, it doesn't matter what I think about this. I'm irrelevant in this. You're the one speaking. Yeah. You know, it's all about you. It's not about I need to be right or anything. I need to get out of my head. And we really learn this in Coactive. Yeah. And it's all about you. So being present, so being really present with you, letting you speak, asking you questions about that. That's the thing, asking you questions, not saying, oh, but why don't you see it this way? Or why don't you do that? Or that's a good thing. Or I don't know, these opinions that just do not help at all. Or, oh, I thought you'd feel like that. Like, just completely skipping over how you're feeling. So how are you feeling? Okay, what's making you feel like that? Like, really digging deep into what the person is saying, but without any what's the word? Of course, without any judgment, but without any, I can't think of the word.
Any other intention, right? Or projecting your own stuff onto people.
Yes. And I think, and I've realized that actually is a skill. That is a skill, because like I said, even with like best friends of mine, and I think, what are you saying? I think, luckily I know that they don't mean it, and I'm not going to take it personally or literally what they're saying, but it's like, wow, that's not right. That's not right at all. You don't say that to people. But that's the thing. It's not just, there's more to it. It sounds simple, but it's not easy to do.
Exactly. And it comes with that level of self-awareness, right, that you've spoken about, because as a coach, you know, we learn, right, don't we, to hold space in that way. We learn that skill. And it's so interesting to say this, because I recognize throughout my coaching journey that actually in coaching sessions I'm amazing at that, but in my personal relationships I had to take a real hard look at myself and be like, why am I giving them my opinion right now? They didn't ask me for it. Like, what is going on? So my journey as a coach was very eye-opening when it comes to my own relationships as well. Not that I don't think I ever judged anybody like or harshly, but I just gave them an opinion that was unnecessary because they didn't ask, you know. So I think there's so much like weight to watch.
But you're right, actually, because now that's actually made me realize that when I'm being a friend rather than a coach, maybe I'm judging as well. Actually, I didn't even think about that. I'm just thinking of me as a coach, not them. That's very interesting. I need to look at myself more. Probably I'm doing it, and that's why I see it in them.
When I'm right, because like rule 101 of coaching, I remember our coach instructor saying to us, like, never coach family and friends, right? It's almost so it's like you almost like try to take the hat off, but actually what a friend needs when they're sharing something with me is me to say, how does that make you feel? Right? They don't want me to say, I get why you're feeling that way, or reaffirming how they feel. Actually, they perhaps need something neutral, you know.
I do sometimes, but also I was taught in the coach training that never sneaky coach.
Oh, interesting.
Coaching somebody without their permission. Yeah,
exactly. You have to agree. So
it's difficult, isn't it?
It is, right? Where's the line?
This awareness thing is not easy.
It's not. Jasmine, listen, I'm very aware of the time, and I want to just thank you for coming on the show. Is there any final words of wisdom that you want to share with our audience while you're here?
Final words of wisdom. I would say final words of wisdom. It makes it pressure. I think to start, if you're on this self-awareness journey and you just started it, maybe, I think, because it was so powerful for me, what do you say to yourself when you look in the mirror?
Nice.
That's it. And are those words going to help you throughout the day? Would you say that to your friends? Things like that.
Yeah.
And there's no quick fix. I think that would be it. There's no quick fix. And it doesn't matter if what I finally learn, if people don't understand how I'm feeling, that's okay. You know, I always craved that validation growing up, but actually it doesn't mean my emotions are not important just because somebody hasn't validated them. And I learned to validate them myself, but
That's amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All useful tips and insights that anybody listening can definitely relate to and then start to simulate and use in their own lives. So I've got another question for you, actually. If you could go and fast forward and meet your future self, what would you ask her?
Okay. How old?
However old you want to go to.
Future self. What would I ask her? Oh wow, that's a very interesting question. I've always gone to the past, not the future. Future self. Oh my God, that's such a good question. Wait, if I go to the future, what would I ask her? Maybe did you live a life true to yourself? Maybe.
Nice.
I don't know. I could probably think of a better one, but I need more time. But yeah, maybe something like that. Like, were you true to yourself? Were you honest with yourself?
Interesting.
Maybe. Yeah, something like that.
I love that.
I'm gonna have a think there. I like that question.
Amazing. Jasmine, where can our listeners come and find you to follow the work that you do and check out your coaching programs?
So Instagram with Nava, WITHNAVA, Jasmine Navarro on LinkedIn, and my website withnava.com.
Beautiful. Amazing. Jasmine, thank you so much for being here today. And I am sure our listeners will come and follow your work and stay tuned with you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's an absolute pleasure. And I've learned a lot from talking to you today.
Thank you. Right back at you, my friend. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
Then share it with a friend who you think might benefit.
Spread the word. That's how we're going to impact the world, by helping each other.
We appreciate you so much, and as always, unconditional love and wellness to you.